Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to G Bear's Off-Grid Ways, a homestead in the desert, March 27th, 2021. All right, so fulfilling a few requests from the generator video, I'm going to show you how to make up that extension cord that you would use to run from your generator in through a window into your house or cabin or whatever, so that you can plug in multiple items. As we know, most extension cords only have one plug end on them. Okay, and this one's lit up because yes, it is plugged in. Okay, and this one is actually dangerous because the insulation has pulled out of the end connector here, and the wires are exposed. But there's no breaks in the wires, so I'm not worried about getting electrocuted at this point. A lot of people will wrap those in electrician's tape, but OSHA says, no, 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 don't do that. If you have a safety officer on your job site, he'll come over if he sees a cord like this or with tape on it anywhere, like this one, taped up. He'll just come over, pull the plug on you, and cut the ends off of your extension cord. So at that point, you have a good piece of extension cord to make up one of these items. Now, I'm only going to deal with what would be basically an indoor extension cord. It's not for going outside in the weather, whether it's wet, damp, or anything like that. You don't want to use this outside. Of course, it will be plugged into your generator's GFCI, and again, GFCI stands for Ground Fault Circuit Interrupter. And what that means is, if there's a fault to the ground, to the grounding of your circuit, it'll pop the breaker rather than electrocute you. And it doesn't take much of a fault. I mean, it's a fraction of a volt that would cause that thing to pop on you. Okay, but we don't need to get into that. I just wanted to touch base on that with you. All right, so in the meantime, while you're listening to this, you might want to get up and get yourself a piece of paper and a pen so you can write down some of the items that you're going to need to do this. Okay, I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that while I cover a couple of other things. All right. There's a bunch of different pieces of electrical equipment that you can buy in Home Depot, and I'm going to try to stay with the simplest, okay? And I had to go through my container here and find what I needed in order to show you this. Some of the stuff you can even buy at like Harbor Freight Tools, but for your basic unit, you can probably get everything at one place. Go to Home Depot, because Harbor Freight does not sell SO cord or wire. They do sell extension cords, and I'm going to tell you that that would be a shortcut that a lot of people can take to make this extension cord, multiplex extension cord, up a little bit quicker. Okay? It makes it a lot easier for you if you go that route. All right. All right, everybody got their pens and papers and pencils and papers and all that kind of stuff already? Here we go. We'll start off with some of the items you're going to need. All right. You'll need a pair of wire strippers. Okay, now you could probably just use a sharp knife or something like that to strip the ends of your wires. But the problem that you're going to have is that works pretty good on solid wire. This is 12 solid. Okay, you can see how stiff and rigid it is. And this is what the bare wire would look like without insulation on it. All right, so you're going to have to be able to strip these. And you could strip this with a knife, because the solid wire won't tear up or break as easily as stranded wire. Now, this is stranded wire, and you can see it's all twisted at the ends here. Oh, this was an SO cord that I had made a 10 gauge extension cord out of. Now, 10 gauge extension cords are not something that you want to do. Why? Well, because it's called overamping. And what happens is your extension cord carries more electricity than your electrical outlet, which is 12 gauge. This is 10 gauge. So this will not pop the breaker, because what pops a breaker, let me explain that very quickly. What pops a breaker is actually heat. So when there's a problem in the wiring, the wire heats up, and when it reaches a certain temperature, a circuit breaker will click, pop off. And that's for safety reasons, so you don't burn the place down. So if you have heavier wire in your extension cord than you have in your wall, then your extension cord could have a short, but by the time it actually gets hot enough to send a signal through the 12 gauge wire over to the breaker, you're going to have a real major problem going on. So that's why they outlaw that. It's called overamping. You can't use heavier wire just because you're tired of your circuit breaker popping. It doesn't work that way. All right, so let's get back to what we need here. Some of the things you're going to need, like I said, wire strippers. You'll need a screwdriver. Make it a flat screwdriver and a Phillips screwdriver. You'd like to have both of those. Why? Well, most of these receptacles have screws on them that will handle either a Phillips or a slotted screw. Why do you need two? You can use one or the other. Well, simply, one of the number one reasons of electricity faults in a house is improper tightening of the neutral side, which is the white wire of a receptacle. If those are not tight enough, when the circuits are put together and you put a load on there, the loose connection will actually cause this thing to heat up at that point, and a lot of times this wire will burn. It'll just burn right off of there and disconnect your circuit, and then all of a sudden you're going, hey, how come I don't have power over here? The breakers are on. Well, that's what causes it, improper tightening. And you cannot get a good tightening on these screws with a Phillips screwdriver. You have to put a slotted screwdriver in that long slot, and then you can lock them down nice and tight. Another problem that people have with when they're connecting receptacles is they wrap the wire around in the wrong way. You remember tighty-righty, loosey-lefty? All right, so tighty-righty means you would tighten this screw this way. So you want the loop in your wire to be bent the same direction that you're going to tighten that screw. If you put it the reverse way while you're tightening the screw, it's actually going to try to open up the closure on that. And that connection, where the wire wraps around a screw, is supposed to go about 3/4 of the way around the screw. So what I usually do is I will put a loop in it like this using these pliers. You grab the end and you twist it and bend a loop in the end. Okay, I think I could show you on this neutral wire right here, if I can straighten it out. Now these are all receptacles that I took out of job sites. There's nothing wrong with them, they'll work. But anyway, this is how you do it. You grab it with the tips right there and you bend it into that position. Let me see if I got that in screen. Okay, so you're going to bend it into that position. And then that can fit around a screw. Well, there we go. Like that. Okay, and then what I like to do is I push it to one side so that the tail is showing on the other side. And then I can grab it with my pliers and I can close it around the screw a little bit more. All right, so make sure it's nice and snug. Let me see if I can get that out of there now so I can show you some other things. All right, so those are some of the things that you're going to have to do. So you're going to also need a 4x4 box. Now you can actually get a 4x6 box and put 3 receptacles in it if you want to do that, and you have 6 plugs that you could go with. I go with the 4 plug like this because it's a little bit easier to deal with and handle with. But in construction, I never really need to plug more than 4 things in at a time. But in your house, you might want to have 6 things plugged in, so you could actually put 6 together on there. The problem that you have with that is pay attention to what you plug into it. Now remember, you're running 1 circuit to this. Just because you have 6 plugs doesn't mean you have 6 circuits. You have 1 circuit with 6 outlets. So you got to make sure you do your math and make sure that that doesn't overamp and pop the breaker. So if you got a 15 amp item, a 5 amp item, and a 1 amp item, and you put those 3 in there, you're already at 21 amps, and your breaker box for your receptacles is only 20 amps. So it's not going to hold, it's going to pop. So you got to be careful of what you plug in. All right, so this is a nice type of box to buy. It has this little clamp unit right down here, and then it has these little knockouts where you stick a screwdriver in the slot and then just bend it out of there and then break it off, and you'll end up with this. So now you can just slip your wire in through there and then make your connections inside the box. All right, so if you're using this type of box, and this type has 2 screws on the ends, it doesn't have 4 little ears on it like this one does. See, this one has 4 ears on it where the receptacles can tie in. Well, when you're using this type of box, you would use either a piece like this and then put another cover plate over it, like something like this. This is for outdoor use. This is so that you could close it off so nobody could play with it. And if you have kids in the house, you might want to add something like that to your system. Now this is a commercial type cover, and it comes with a little pack of screws in there. And what you have to do is you have to break the ears off of the ends of these. And there's the ears, the Mickey Mouse ears. Okay, so you got 1, 2, 3, 4. So you have to break them off on it for them to fit inside of here, because the ears won't fit in there. And then you have these little screws and nuts that you can bolt that thing into place so that they are solid inside the cover. Then you have to take the 2 corner screws out of your box, and you put this cover plate onto the box after you've got everything connected, and you've got a nice safe box. Of course, with kids around, you got to be careful with this, because kids want to go over and they see you plug in, so they want to plug something in, and you don't know if it's going to be a fork or a knife or a spoon or whatever. Just be careful with kids around the house. This is basically an adult type situation. So if you can, when you run this thing inside the house, put it up high where the kids can't get to it, and then secure it there so that they don't pull on the cord and have it come down and hit them in the head. All right, so like I said, this kind is nice because you can put the wire in there and just tighten the screw down and clamp it. Notice there's a green screw inside of there. You do want to ground to your box. Don't rest assured that just because you're grounded to your receptacle, see the bare wire connected there, no pun intended, but you do want to make sure that ties into there. Now, because you're going to be using multiple receptacles, each one could either have a bare wire or a green wire coming off the ground screw. And the ground screw will always be the one at the bottom corners of your receptacles. And on the receptacle itself, you have 2 screws on each side. Okay, 2 of them will be gold in color, and 2 of them will be silver in color. Just remember, silver and white go together. The gold screws is for the colored wire, whether it be a black wire, a yellow wire, a blue wire, whatever color wire you're using for the hot wire, then you would connect it to the gold screw. Just remember, the white one has to go on the silver screw, and the green or the bare wire go on the ground screw. So what you would do is you would get your receptacles ready. You're going to have two set receptacles side by side. So you're going to get ready and you're going to make your white wires, and you will need two short pieces of wire like this, a white and whatever color you're using. Normally it's black, and very seldom does anybody use red, because red and black together in a circuit mean 220 volts. So you don't want to do that if you can avoid it. All right, so you would have a black, a white, a green, or a bare wire. Now, first thing you want to do is, inside of your box, is make a little loop in the wire like I showed you to. Put it around that green screw, and then leave it sticking out of the box like that. All right, so that's going to give you something to tie your grounds to. Then you would have your green wire or your bare wire, and it doesn't matter if you mix and match them for ground, coming off of your two receptacles like this. Okay, so you would be able to connect those to the wire that's inside of your box. Let me see if I can just simulate that here. Okay, so we got the ground wire in the box. Then you would take your two receptacles and take your two ground wires, and those would go together with a wire nut. These are wire nuts, and you would probably could get away with at this point using a yellow colored wire nut, but red ones are better for this case because we're going to be using stranded wire on the positive and neutral. Okay, so you want to get those together and make sure nothing pulls out. If something pulls out, take that nut off again and make sure all three of your tips of your wire are aligned together, and then start over again and make sure those are really, really tight. Twist them until you can't twist anymore. All right, so that's nice and tight. All right, so there you go. Now the grounds are connected to the box, so we got safety going on. All right, so I'm going to disconnect that. And you see I got the white on this one already. I'd have to put a black on this side. Okay, so you would do that on both of these. You'd have a white and a black. Now don't put a loop in the end of it like this. Okay, that's for a different phase. But you would have this one here. Well, yeah, you would put a loop in it, because this set of wires is going to have to wrap around and connect to this receptacle. So remember, the black wire would go on your gold screw on the first receptacle, so you'd have to wrap it around to the other side of the second receptacle, and it would go to the gold screw on the second receptacle like that. And your white wire would come off of the white side of the first receptacle and go to the second receptacle on the silver screw. All right, so that would go there. And then your two extra pieces of wire, your black and your white, would come off of the second receptacle on the extra screw. White wire off the silver, black wire off the gold, and then those would just strip about a ½ an inch off of the bottoms of these. Oh, hard to do with my hands full. Okay, so you'd have that stripped off the end right there. And then your wire nuts, you could wire nut those to the incoming wires from your SO cord. Now remember, I told you there's an easier way of doing this rather than buying a length of SO cord like this, where you'd have to put a plug on one end, like one of these, or one of these. So you would already have a plug on it if you start with a 12 gauge extension cord, much like this one. And I already put a plug end on this one because this was an old cord that was bad and I fixed it to make a new cord out of it. Okay, so you'd put a plug end on the end, but if you already have an extension cord, it'll have a male and a female plug on it. So the female would look like this. You'd cut that end off. Now don't cut it off too close. Leave a little tail off of there, because those always come in handy for other things down the line. And I'm not going to get into that because I've got to get this through this video. All right. So if you start with an extension cord, you're going to cut the female end off, which was the end I showed you a little while ago on the cord that was lit up. And what I did with it, I haven't a clue. But anyway, you would cut that end off, and then that would go in through your box hole here. And then that would be your feed. So your 3 wires coming out of it would be green, black, and white. And what you would get if you were buying SO cord at Home Depot, you would buy 12-2 with ground. Okay, 12-2 with ground. Make sure you say with ground. That'll be the green wire. If you say 12-2 and you don't say with ground, you may just get that. And that's not going to do you any good because you can't ground it. So 12-2 with ground. This is 10, but basically it looked the same. And because it's stranded, it's easier if you wire nut them all together rather than trying to put stranded around the screw of one of these receptacles, because stranded wants to go in all different directions no matter how many times you twist it. So that just makes it easier. So you use wire nuts to tie the extension cord into your wires that come off your receptacles. All right? All right, so where are we? What am I forgetting? All right, so bottom line is this is basically what it'll look like after you put it all together. And then on mine, I just used a metal cover plate that goes on like that. And 2 screws go into the 2 center holes that hold the cover plate on. On this type, you don't need to put that cover plate because this is the cover plate. Your receptacle will be fastened to this, and then a single screw in the center will actually give you extra strength so that you can really push an extension cord in there without it popping out and going behind you. All right. So, lastly, but not least, okay, same thing on your plug ends. If you were going to add a plug end to SO cord, you're going to have 3 screws in there. And the 3 screws are right down inside of here. Okay, so you're going to have a white or silver screw, you're going to have a gold screw, and either black or green screw. Okay, so remember, silver screw always gets the white wire. Always put that one in first. So the gold screw always gets your colored wire. On this one they used red wire. Again, I said I don't like using red wire. The green or the bare wire would go in the black screw or the green screw. All right, that's very important, because what that does is it makes sure that your neutral and your hot are on the right side. On a receptacle, the neutral is always the larger opening. Okay, so you got a long slot and a short slot. So the longer one is always the neutral, and the shorter one is always your hot. Then this one down here, the one that's saying, oh no, that's your ground. So don't make it say, oh no, and forget to connect your grounds. All right. So if you use one of these types of boxes, you'll have knockouts on the side like this. You actually have to hit those pretty hard with something. They'll pop inside of the box and you can grab them with pliers and twist them and break them out, and you'll end up with a hole like this. Then you would have to get a Romex connector like this. You take this little star nut off, you put that through there and put the nut on the inside and lock it down, and then your SO cord or your extension cord would go in through here, and then you tighten these two screws down so that it doesn't pull out. All right? So that's that. Lastly, some of the other things about receptacles. You see, this one has kind of a T-shape on this side. It still will handle a regular 120 plug. It'll plug right in there without a problem. Okay, but try not to use these, because that little T side right there signifies that this is for a higher voltage. It could be for 208 or 220. All right, so you don't want to use this one if you don't have to. Now, but when you're buying the receptacles, there's all types of prices out there. You can get the really super cheapy old ones, like well, it's not it. This one here. Okay, this one doesn't even have screws on the side. It has push-in openings in the back. Don't use it. It's junk. It's a fire hazard. Don't use these. Okay, the reason for that, I say don't use these, is normally you would take your wire and just push it into here, and then it's supposed to lock into place. Well, the way these things work is inside that hole, there's only one little slight piece of spring in there that grabs onto one side of this wire, and it just covers a little section. So you don't really have a good connection between the receptacle and your wire, and it could burn and cause a fire. So you do not use this piece of junk. If you see these, throw them away. I keep them because I can use them for DC output. All right, and then on this one, this is the type that you would like to get, because when you loosen the screw, you notice that there's a little plate in there, and if you separate it, then you can put your wire straight in. You don't have to put a loop around the end of the wire and try to bend it around the screw like I did there. Okay, you would just basically put this wire in like that, tighten the screw, and you're all set. All right? So this would be the type of screw unit that you want. Try to avoid the cheaper ones like this, because again, if you don't get them tight enough, you could end up burning wires inside of your box or your wall or whatever. All right. Lastly, the really super cheap ones are like this. And these little holes, they won't even hold 12 gauge wire. The biggest piece of wire you could put in there is 16 gauge. And you can't use 16 gauge on electrical receptacles anywhere in this country. So avoid that. All right. That's about all I have for you today. If there are any questions, comments, down below, don't forget to give me a thumbs up down there, and don't forget to subscribe. Subscriptions are climbing very quickly. I'll get to that 5,000 in no time, and I appreciate that. So let's keep it going, everybody. This is G Bear signing off.